One of the things that I want to hit on, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with this saying, is that all truth is God's truth. Now, when I was looking for schools to complete my graduate degree at, I really felt very, very strongly that I wanted to go to a Christian university. However, I also felt very strongly that I did not want a Christian counseling degree. I wanted to be familiar with all the theories and the models that were out there so that I could really, really find solutions to fit different clients that I was working with rather than kind of limiting me to a very, very specific population. So as I started my program, one of the things that became very, very evident and something that I grew to love in that program, and this is how I practice and live my life on a daily basis, is that all truth is God's truth. So really, whatever is true is ours to claim as a believer. Yes, what is true, the Bible is true, and so we claim that. But the truth in biology and psychology and economics and physics and astrology and all of those sorts of things, what is true? And if those things are true, then we as believers get to claim them because they are God's, because God is truth. And so as we take that concept into our own practices in our lives, we might consider saying, hey, even though this is not necessarily a biblical practice or a Christian practice, because it is true, we can bring this into our counseling practice and know that we are actually operating from a very, very biblical standpoint without our client actually knowing that. So, of course, we're not trying to hide who we are, but it's also not our role as a therapist to bring up our own faith values. Yet, at the same time, because of who God is, if it's truth, the thing is, it's going to work. Now, people might not like it. They might not accept the truth. But the fact of the matter is, because God is truth, we can claim anything that is true and have full confidence to know that even if it isn't a spiritual discipline that we're encouraging our clients to take on in their own lives, as we speak truth to them as therapists, we are actually speaking Christ to them. So that's a really unique approach, and we'll talk about it a little bit later as far as how that might actually be fleshed out in your counseling practice. So, the one thing that I really wanted to add in kind of as a disclaimer is what would happen if you are a Christian therapist working with a Christian client, and how would you incorporate or not incorporate Christian faith practices, and really what would be the harm in incorporating Christian faith practices. And I think that this is a really, really important thing to focus on. Now, as you guys go into your graduate programs and decide the types of clients you're going to want to work with and how you market yourself, you will come across a decision to either market yourself as a Christian counselor or to market yourself as a counselor. And what happens with that is people who search for a Christian counselor oftentimes have a very keen awareness that there's going to be a lot of Christian faith practices brought into the therapy session. And so they're probably going to choose somebody that they feel like they could trust spiritually, and that they might have an alignment as far as some of their spiritual values. Now, the flip side of that is to be a counselor who is a Christian. Now, you wouldn't necessarily market yourself as a counselor who's a Christian. You would market yourself as a counselor. However, now I live in the South, so I'm in what's called the Bible Belt. And so everybody down here is a Christian. They all go to big Baptist churches. Everybody's a Christian. Everybody knows about God. Everybody very much accepts faith practices. It is very common to walk into coffee shops and see multiple people having Bible studies or reading their Bible or journaling or digging into what would be considered some Christian faith practices. It's very, very common, and most of the time it's not ridiculed at all if somebody is going to be talking about or demonstrating something out of their spiritual practices. So, all of that to say, I've gotten many questions as I have opened my own practice regarding if I'm a Christian counselor. And what I always tell my clients or prospective clients is that I do not market myself as a Christian counselor. I market myself as a counselor who is a Christian. Because what that helps the client to understand is that if they decide to come to me, they might get a biblical perspective outright if that's what they ask for or if that's what they value and want brought into the therapeutic process. But they're also going to get the latest and the greatest secular psychology methods brought into that session or those sessions. Now, a lot of times this is very comforting to the client because of the background that they have with their own faith and just kind of the connotations around it. So, I lay that out as the groundwork because I think it's important to recognize that even if you are a Christian therapist or a therapist who's a Christian with a Christian client and they've made it very clear to you that they are a believer, you still have to exercise some amount of control over how much spirituality you bring up in a session. And we're going to continue this discussion in the next lecture.